Welcome back. Former President Trump slamming the gag order in his so-called hush money trial yesterday, saying that he should be able to campaign for president just like Joe Biden is doing instead of dealing with this trial. Watch.
The case is a sham and it shouldn't even be tried. We have a gag order, which to me is totally unconstitutional. I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me. They can say whatever they want. They can lie, but I'm not allowed to say anything. So we're locked up in a courtroom, and this guy's out there campaigning. If you call it a campaign, every time he opens his mouth, he gets himself into trouble.
Joining me now is Trump's 2024 National Press Secretary, Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, you've had some week. You've been in court with the 45th president all week long. How's he holding up? What can you tell us about the proceedings?
President Trump remains defiant in the face of this witch hunt. And I will say it is such a shame to see the former president of the United States being prosecuted like a criminal in a criminal court here in New York City when there are real criminals running free in the streets. This is a case being brought by a Democrat prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, who has a clear vendetta against President Trump, overseen by a Democrat partisan judge who donated money to Joe Biden's campaign in a Democrat jurisdiction where they know it's nearly impossible for President Trump to get a fair and impartial jury. So it's despicable to watch this take place. And as the president just laid out, not only is this a witch hunt, it is also an unconstitutional violation of his First Amendment rights. It shows the disdain that the judge has for the president, that he put this unconstitutional gag order on him. Not only are they prosecuting him, they don't even want him to speak about it. And it's terrible to watch.
Well, that's incredible, especially as you see Joe Biden traveling into all the swing states and attacking Trump, attacking MAGA Republicans. He's saying whatever he wants to say.
We are in the midst of a presidential election, and that's exactly why this case is coming. They have had 8 years to bring these alleged crimes, which aren't even crimes, by the way. President Trump did nothing wrong. Alvin Bragg and his team had to do legal gymnastics to even bring this case forward. It would have been thrown out of any other courtroom in America, but it's being brought here because Joe Biden, by the way, is behind all of this, and they are leading this election interference front to keep President Trump off of the campaign trail, confine him to a courtroom so he can't bring his winning message to voters across the country. But unfortunately for them, their strategy is backfiring. They underestimated the power of President Trump. He's an earned media machine. Everywhere he goes, the cameras follow him. He'll continue to speak out about this despite the gag order, and he'll continue to hit the campaign trail as hard as he always has.
Well, prosecutors are also alleging that Trump committed, quote, conspiracy to promote or prevent election, saying he tried to cover things up before the election by falsifying business records. Trump pled not guilty to all 34 counts against him. Karoline, earlier I mentioned the 2016 election and when Hillary Clinton paid for the dossier.
Right.
And she basically, her campaign called it legal expenses. Was that not exactly what they're trying to pin on Trump right now?
They are literally prosecuting the president with these alleged crimes, 34 felony counts, for paying his legal personal attorney and marking it as a legal expense. What else was he supposed to do? It was perfectly legal. They have manufactured and fabricated these charges 8 years later, again, because it's an effort to protect Joe Biden and weaken President Trump ahead of the next election. That's exactly what this case is. Legal scholars on both sides of the aisle agree with that. You brought up the point about Hillary Clinton. I'd like to bring up, how about Joe Biden, whose corrupt family set up 30 shell companies when he was vice president of the United States? He's become a multi-millionaire, selling off his public access as vice president, and no trials for Biden because they're being led by him against President Trump.
Well, Hannah, what about that? Jump in here, because I think that if you are talking about the fact that it is an election year, shouldn't you be able to bring up both sides? I mean, you know, we've got the House Oversight Committee making some serious allegations against Joe Biden and his family. Money laundering, influence peddling. We're not allowed to talk about it. Nobody brings it up now, but they're all over Trump for something that Hillary Clinton, in fact, did in 2016.
Well, and they keep censoring people who try to talk about it, right? Kicking them offline, shutting it down. They don't even want to have the conversation. There should be investigations. And this is a common complaint I have about Republicans. They need to go on the offense at some point, right? I mean, Democrats, we know how they're going to play. We know how they're going to operate. At at some point you have to rise up and fight back. And I don't see that really happening. I do think that they're winning this round. But I also agree with Karoline. It is not playing in the public eye like they hoped it would. It really is backfiring against them. I think that's pretty plain and evident. And as somebody who hates the criminal justice system and thinks it's completely corrupt in this country, I love seeing it exposed for what it is.
We saw how much it backfired when President Trump went to a bodega in Harlem, in New York City, a Democrat jurisdiction. And there were people, Harlem residents, outside of the bodega chanting, "Lying Bragg," because they know that their district attorney is a liar and he is corrupt. And he spends their tax dollars going after the former president of the United States who made the people in New York lives better. He's spending all this time and money going after him, but not the real violent criminals in Harlem who are robbing bodegas, who are raping women, and who are killing innocent Americans.
Yeah, we have a bit of that when President Trump went to that bodega. Let's take a listen. The crowds chanting 4 more years outside the bodega. And then Joe Biden tried to copy that by going to a gas station. He didn't exactly get this kind of crowd. But Karoline, the Supreme Court will hear arguments tomorrow on whether Trump should be granted presidential immunity from special counsel Jack Smith's election interference investigation. What is your team expecting here?
Well, we expect that the Supreme Court will rule on the side of justice and the law. And all President Trump and his team are asking for is not just for him. They're asking for the protection for all future presidents of the United States, that they be granted immunity for official acts when they are president. And if presidents do not have this immunity, they will be prohibited from making official acts as president. They will be entitled to witch hunts by their political opposition and indictments like we're seeing right now. And so we hope the Supreme Court will rule not just in favor of President Trump, but all future presidents, so that they can act in their official capacity as president to do what's best for the United States of America. You have to have immunity. Our country will not function. And our founding fathers knew that. And that's why this is the first time in more than 200 years since our country's founding that the president of the United States is being prosecuted for official acts as president. And the Supreme Court must do the right thing to protect our democracy for the years to come.
Well, that will be one important ruling we'll be focused on. Karoline, good to see you. Thank you.